Breaking overnight, Chicago police are investigating a deadly shooting on the city's west side. Officers tell us they were called to the area near Franklin and Spalding for a report of a person shot.
Well, protect me from my so-called friends so I can kill my own enemies. 9 times out of 10, the ops ain't gonna kill shit. Be their own homies, snaked out.
A man lies on the concrete, blood pooling around him. His chest rises and falls, slow and heavy. His eyes are wide open, staring up at the faces around him. Faces he knows, faces he trusts, faces he's protected for years. But nobody moves. Some of them are too high to think straight. Others are frozen in fear. A few just don't care enough to risk their own skin. They all stand there watching him bleed out on the street. The gun that was supposed to keep him safe? It's the same gun that just put bullets in his body. This is 35-year-old Nikko Whitehead, street name Cheeks the Dawn, a Vice Lord's OG who survived over 3 decades in one of Chicago's most dangerous neighborhoods. He fed these people, he protected them, he called them brothers. And on June 29th, 2024, they let him die. This is the story of how loyalty became a lie. Sadiq and the streets claimed another OG. But what led to this moment? What turned brothers into bystanders? And why does Nikko's killer still walk free today? Welcome to Homicide Exposed. Humboldt Park sits on Chicago's west side. It's a neighborhood where gang lines run deep, where survival means knowing which blocks are safe and which ones aren't. In 2024, Chicago saw hundreds of people shot and killed. Most of them were young. Most of them were Black or Latino. And most of their cases never made national news. Nikko DeMarcus O'Neill Whitehead was born on January 5th, 1989. By the time he turned 35, he'd become someone people knew, someone people respected. On the streets, they called him Cheeks the Dawn. He was a Vice Lord's OG, a leader in one of Chicago's oldest and biggest street organizations. But Nikko wasn't just a street guy. He had another side to him. He appeared in hood films and got featured on Zack TV, a platform that gave voices to people the mainstream media ignored. He was trying to build something beyond the block, trying to make a name for himself in entertainment while still staying connected to where he came from. It was a hard balance to keep, and on June 29th, 2024, that balance would cost him everything. Before we go further into what happened that night, I want to hear from you. If you're watching from Chicago or any city dealing with street violence, drop your location in the comments. Let's see where our true crime community is tuning in from, and hit that subscribe button. We cover real cases like this that deserve attention. Nikko Whitehead came into this world on January 5th, 1989, right in the heart of Chicago. He grew up in a place where gang culture wasn't just something you saw on TV. It was your everyday reality. It shaped the way you walked, the way you talked, who you could be friends with, and which streets you could walk down safely. For Nikko, joining the Vice Lords wasn't just a choice. In neighborhoods like his, it was often about survival and belonging. The Vice Lords, also called the Vice Lords, started back in the 1950s on Chicago's west side. They're one of the oldest and largest street organizations in the city. Over the decades, they've had thousands of members across different neighborhoods. For many young men growing up with no father figures, no job opportunities, and no way out, the Vice Lords became family. They offered protection, respect, and a sense of purpose that the world outside wasn't giving them. And Nikko rose through the ranks. By his 30s, he'd earned the title of OG, Original Gangster. That's not just a name. It means you've survived. It means you've put in work. It means younger guys look up to you and older guys respect you. In a world where most people don't make it past 25, Nikko had made it to 35. That alone said something about who he was. People in his community knew him as Cheeks the Don. He was a leader. When there were problems, people came to him. When someone needed help, they called on him. He had influence, and he used it to hold things together in a neighborhood that was always one argument away from violence. But Nikko wanted more than just street respect. He started appearing in hood films, low-budget movies that told stories about life in the streets. He got featured on Zack TV, a YouTube channel that interviewed gang members and street figures from all over Chicago. Through these platforms, Nikko was building a name outside of just his block. He was showing people that he had personality, that he could talk, that he was more than just a gang member. It was a tough line to walk. On one hand, he was trying to move into entertainment and maybe create a different future for himself. On the other hand, he was still deeply connected to the streets. He still had to maintain his reputation. He still had to show up for his people. He couldn't just leave that life behind, even if part of him wanted to. Nikko had relationships all over Humboldt Park. He had people he called brothers, guys he'd known for years, guys he'd been through wars with, guys he trusted with his life. And that's the tragedy of it all. And Nikko survived shootouts, rival gangs, police raids, and everything else the streets threw at him for over 3 decades. But in the end, it wasn't an enemy that took him down. It was the people standing right next to him. June 29th, 2024. A Saturday night in the middle of summer. In Chicago, that's when the streets come alive. The weather was warm, the kind of night where people stay outside late, sitting on porches, hanging on corners, music playing from car speakers. The 3,300 block of West Franklin Boulevard in Humboldt Park was no different. People were out. The energy was high. It was the kind of night where anything could happen, good or bad. Nikko had lived through hundreds of nights just like this one. He knew how quickly things could change. One wrong word, one misunderstood look, one bruised ego. Maybe that's all it took for a regular night to turn deadly. But tonight felt different. There was tension in the air. Maybe it had been building for days, maybe weeks. Old issues that never got resolved. Disrespect that never got addressed. Egos that were too big to back down. Nikko had no idea that the next few hours would be his last. He had no idea that the people around him, the ones he trusted, the ones he protected, would become witnesses to his death instead of defenders of his life. Words were about to be exchanged. Words that couldn't be taken back. It started with words. Nobody knows exactly what was said, but whatever it was, it hit a nerve. Voices got louder, egos got bigger. In the streets, respect is everything. You can't let someone talk to you a certain way and just walk away. If you do, you look weak. And looking weak can get you hurt, or worse. The argument kept going back and forth, neither side backing down. People around them started paying attention. This wasn't just talk anymore. This was about to become something else. That's when someone said it. Let's handle this like men. In street culture, that phrase means one thing. Violence. It means you're done talking. It means fists, or worse. It's a challenge that can't be ignored without losing face. Nikko wasn't the type to back down. He'd built his reputation on being strong, on standing his ground. So when the moment came, he reached for his gun first. But then something happened that nobody expected. As Nikko leaned to pull the trigger, he slipped. Maybe it was the angle, maybe his footing was off. Whatever it was, the gun went off, but the bullet didn't hit his opponent. It hit Nikko's own leg. The pain must have been instant. Shock, confusion. And in that split second of weakness, his opponent saw an opening. He rushed forward and snatched the gun right out of Nikko's hand. Now Nikko was defenseless, hurt, vulnerable. And the weapon that was supposed to protect him was now in someone else's hands. What came next was brutal. The man took Nikko's own gun and started pistol whipping him with it, metal crashing against his head, his face over and over. Nikko tried to defend himself, but he was already hurt, already off balance. And then came the worst part. The part that makes this story so hard to tell. There were people standing around. Not strangers, people Nikko knew, people he'd eaten with, people he'd helped, people he called his brothers. They were right there, close enough to step in, Mike close enough to stop it. But nobody moved. Some of them were too high to even process what was happening. Others were too scared to get involved. And some were just too fake. They didn't care enough to risk anything for him. Nikko was on the ground now, his chest rising and falling, slow and heavy. His eyes were wide, looking up at the faces around him. You can only imagine what was going through his mind in those final moments. The realization that nobody was coming to help him, that the loyalty he believed in didn't exist, that he was alone. And then the gunshots came, multiple shots, his own gun now turned against him. The sound echoed through the block. People scattered. But it was too late. Nikko Whitehead, the OG who survived decades in the streets, was dying on the concrete while the people he trusted most just stood there and watched. Pause for a second. Think about being in Nikko's position, betrayed by the people you trusted most. Have you ever experienced betrayal like this? Maybe not to this extreme, but betrayal that changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. And if you're finding this case as shocking as I did, smash that like button. At 11:10 p.m., Chicago police got the call. Shots fired on the 3300 block of West Franklin Boulevard in Humboldt Park. When officers arrived, they found Nikko Whitehead lying on the ground. He had multiple gunshot wounds to his body, blood everywhere. His chest was still moving, but barely. Paramedics rushed him to Stroger Hospital, one of the main trauma centers in Chicago. Doctors and nurses did everything they could to save him, but the damage was too severe. Nikko DeMarcus O'Neill Whitehead was pronounced dead. He was 35 years old. The case was handed over to Area 4 detectives. The Cook County Medical Examiner's Office officially identified the body and confirmed the cause of death: multiple gunshot wounds. Now came the investigation. Detectives started asking questions. They knew people had been there. They knew there were witnesses. But here's the problem. Nobody was talking. This is what they call the code of silence. In neighborhoods like Humboldt Park, cooperating with police can get you labeled as a snitch. And snitches don't last long. So even though people saw exactly what happened, even though they knew who pulled the trigger, they kept their mouths shut. To this day, no arrests have been made in Nikko's murder, and the community's reaction was mixed. Some people mourned him. They posted tributes on social media, talked about the good things he did, remembered him as a leader and a protector. But others distanced themselves. They didn't want to be connected to what happened. They didn't want the attention. They didn't want the risk. The neighborhood started to fracture. Lines were drawn. Some people stayed loyal to Nikko's memory. Others moved on like nothing happened. The block got quieter. But it wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was cold, tense. Trust had been shattered. The idea of loyalty, the thing that's supposed to hold street communities together, had been exposed as fake. Nikko's death didn't just take one life. It broke something in the people who were left behind. Nikko's death isn't just one isolated tragedy. It's part of a much bigger problem that's been tearing through Chicago for decades. In 2024, hundreds of people were shot and killed in the city. Most of them were young Black and Latino men. Most of them died in neighborhoods like Humboldt Park, Englewood, Austin, and the South Side. And most of their cases never got solved. Humboldt Park has a long history with gang violence. For years, different organizations have fought over territory, respect, and control. The vice lords are just one piece of a complicated puzzle that includes rival gangs, drug trade, and generations of conflict that never seem to end. Here's the harsh reality. In Chicago, a huge percentage of homicides go unsolved. And when it comes to gang-related cases, that number gets even worse. Why? There are a few reasons. First, there's the code of silence. People don't talk to police because they're afraid of being labeled a snitch. And in these neighborhoods, that label can get you killed. Second, there's fear of retaliation. Even if someone wants to come forward, they know that doing so could put them or their family in danger. Third, there's a deep distrust of police. Years of bad relationships between law enforcement and these communities have made people unwilling to cooperate, even when they want justice. And fourth, resources are limited. When a case involves gang members, it often doesn't get the same attention or manpower as other cases. It's treated as just another gang shooting, even though every life matters. This creates a vicious cycle. One person gets killed, their friends want revenge, so they retaliate. Then the other side retaliates back. And on it goes. And more bodies, more funerals, more mothers crying over their sons. The street code that's supposed to protect people, the idea of loyalty and brotherhood, fails over and over again. Nikko's story proves that. The vice lords lost another member, and the younger generation watching learned the wrong lesson. That violence is how you solve problems. But we have to ask ourselves, why do people join gangs in the first place? It's not because they're bad people. It's because they're growing up in places with no jobs, failing schools, and no opportunities. Gangs offer what society doesn't: protection, belonging, respect, and a way to make money. When you're a kid growing up in poverty with no father figure and no hope, a gang starts to look like family. Nikko's death is a symptom of systemic failure. Decades of disinvestment, racism, and neglect created the environment that took his life. So what can we learn from Nikko's death? First, the street code of loyalty is often an illusion. The same people who promise to have your back will stand there and watch you die. Real loyalty isn't about reputation or respect. It's about action. And when it mattered most, Nikko's so-called brothers did nothing. Second, this tragedy could have been prevented. That argument didn't have to end in death. If there had been conflict resolution programs in place, people trained to step in and mediate before things got violent, Nikko might still be alive today. Third, substance abuse played a role. Remember, some of the bystanders were too high to even react. Access to mental health services and addiction treatment could have changed the outcome. When people are struggling with drugs or trauma, they can't think clearly. They can't help others. They can barely help themselves. Fourth, we need real economic opportunities. People join gangs because they don't see another way to survive. If young men had access to good jobs, job training, and education, they wouldn't need to turn to the streets for income and respect. Fifth, community police relations matter. Nikko's case is unsolved because nobody will talk to investigators. If there was trust between the community and law enforcement, witnesses might come forward. Justice might actually happen. Sixth, bystander intervention training could save lives. Teaching people how to safely step in during conflicts, or at least how to get help, could prevent situations from turning deadly. There are also violence interruption programs that work. Trained community members, often former gang members themselves, step in when they hear about conflicts and stop them before shots get fired. These programs have been proven to reduce violence in cities across the country. But ultimately, we have to address the root causes: poverty, failing schools, lack of housing, no opportunities. These are the things that create the environment where gangs thrive. Chicago has organizations doing this work right now. Programs like Ready Chicago and Chicago Cred focus on helping high-risk individuals by providing therapy, job training, and support. They're making a difference, but they need more funding and more community support. Change is possible, but it requires investment, commitment, and a willingness to see people like Nikko as more than just gang members, as human beings who deserved better. Well, Nikko Whitehead was 35 years old when he died. He survived over 3 decades in one of Chicago's most dangerous neighborhoods. He made it through gang wars, shootouts, and everything else the streets threw at him. But in the end, it wasn't an enemy that killed him. It was the silence of the people he called friends. His case remains unsolved. No arrests, no justice, no closure for anyone who loved him. Someone out there knows exactly what happened that night. They saw it, they were there, but they're choosing to stay silent. Here's the harsh truth that Nikko's story teaches us. The streets don't love anybody. They'll take everything from you and give nothing back. What killed Nikko wasn't just bullets. It was pride. It was drugs. It was ego and jealousy, and the silence of people who should have helped but didn't. Nikko's life mattered. He was more than a gang member. He was a son, a friend, a leader trying to build something beyond the block. His death should matter too. We need justice. We need change. We need to break the cycle that keeps taking young lives in cities like Chicago. Nikko Whitehead's murder remains unsolved. If this story moved you, if you believe every victim deserves justice regardless of their background, leave a comment saying "Justice for Nikko." Let's show that his life mattered. And if you want to see more cases that deserve attention, subscribe and hit that notification bell. What case should we cover next? Drop your suggestions below.